Right, so Keir Starmer has just told, in my view, the most egregious and dangerous lie he's ever told. What he's done is not in the interests of peace or national security or global relations. What he's done is effectively public relations for the most moral army in the world, as they call themselves, the Israeli Defence Force, to actually demonstrate just how utterly immoral they actually are, by telling a pack of lies in order to justify more aggression against their neighbouring states and driving the risk of wider scale conflict up even higher. What he has said to the nation should be the end of him as a Prime Minister, because he's clearly not running this country in our interests, but in the blatant interests of another state entirely. I cannot overestimate the ramifications of what he's now done. You have to see it to believe it. You might have missed it if you've seen this already, and I apologise in advance to anybody of a sensitive disposition. I give you advance warning, because I am about to show a clip of Keir Starmer, and I realise some of you may find this upsetting.
The Iranian regime has launched over 200 ballistic missiles at civilian targets in Israel. It's too soon to assess the impact fully, but I utterly condemn this attempt by the Iranian regime to harm innocent Israelis, to escalate this incredibly dangerous situation and push the region ever closer to the brink. It cannot be tolerated. We stand with Israel and we recognise her right to self-defence in the face of this aggression. Iran must stop these attacks, together with its proxies like Hezbollah. Iran has menaced the Middle East for far too long. Chaos and destruction brought not just to Israel, but to the people they live amongst in Lebanon and beyond. Make no mistake, Britain stands full square against such violence. We support Israel's reasonable demand for the security of its people.
Right, so that was Keir Starmer lying through his teeth to the entire nation. Not for the first time, obviously, with his loose relationship with the truth, but he might as well have been draped in the blue and white flag of Israel as he gave that dribblish speech. And the first words out of his mouth are the ones I want to draw attention to, because what he said there was an egregious lie which does nothing towards working up a ceasefire or peaceful solution, but instead plays straight into Israel's determination to keep the atrocities going. And frankly, that line could have been written for him by the IDF, except even Israel has actually disputed Starmer's version of what happened when Iran retaliated against Israel on Sunday night. Starmer said over 200 ballistic missiles were fired at civilian targets by Iran. This is a lie. Not one civilian body, building or assembly was targeted by Iran at all. Iran has stated repeatedly that their only targets, both in this attack and the ones back in April, were military targets. Yes, Starmer says all the targets this time round were civilians. Israel has also reiterated Iran's version of events here, confirming several Air Force bases or military bases were hit, and the only civilian damage actually done was caused by shrapnel from their own interception missiles taking out Iranian ones. Many Iranian missiles hit their target, according to Iran. Most didn't, according to Israel, but nobody save for Keir Starmer has said Iran targeted civilians. 180 ballistic missiles, and there is not one recorded civilian casualty of that strike. I don't think there was even a military casualty, save for infrastructure. Therefore, even by Israel's own standards, and they're low, Keir Starmer is yet again lying through his teeth. It is impossible to underestimate how unfit for office this makes him when he's prepared to tell such lies on such actions as he is here. This is absolute low-life level stuff. A low-life of a Prime Minister, as we appear to have, who has not helped the peace process one iota by these words, and just deepens the rifts in place between the UK and Iran completely unnecessarily. Here's an excerpt from Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper, detailing the Israeli position as opposed to the pack of lies Starmer stood there and told the nation. The Israeli military said several Air Force bases were damaged in the ballistic missile attack launched by Iran on Tuesday, but that no weapons, soldiers or aircraft were hit. There was no damage that stopped the Air Force's operation at any stage, the military said. It further said that damage to infrastructure and property in civilian areas were only minor and likely caused by shrapnel from interception missiles. The military would not say what the interception rate was in Tuesday's attack, saying this to avoid giving Iran and Hezbollah information that will help them learn lessons. It did say that the country's air defences had operated impressively with high rates of interception. According to officials in the Air Force and the Intelligence Corps, the missiles Iran fired on Tuesday were the most advanced type it has. They said that, contrary to Iran's claims, it hadn't fired a hypersonic missile. They also said the defence establishment is not aware of Iran possessing such missiles. Starmer's lies here have also been summed up very succinctly by author Alex Nunns, who said on the matter, "If Iran says it targeted military bases but not civilian areas, and if Israel says military bases were hit but not civilian areas, it suggests civilian areas were not the target." Take note, Keith, you liar. Stood there with your flags, never enough flags, and to show how much of an opportunist he has also been here, he only got the photographer to take snaps of supposedly him on the phone to Netanyahu, and with all the pensive looks and even more ruddy flags. Those flags are going to be a ball and chain to him after this nonsense he's pulled, in my view, since he's now more blatantly bowing to a blue and white flag than a red, white and blue one. It wouldn't surprise me one iota to start seeing tweets alluding to Starmer being sat in front of the wrong flag now, because he's doing nothing to serve the UK by lying like he is on this matter. He's simply doing PR for the IDF and for Netanyahu to justify even more atrocity on their part. Iran's targets for their 180 missiles were 3 military installations, we're now told. The Nevatim Air Base, which Iran also struck back in April as well, just to the south of the West Bank, home to Netanyahu's Air Force One, knock off the Wing of Zion, but also the likely destination for many flights both by the US and UK from Cyprus, long suspected to be delivery point of arms being sent to the Israeli regime. It is also home to Israel's F-35 jets. Also targeted was the Netzarim military facility in Gaza, the Netzarim corridor, where the targets were allegedly tanks. And the third target was the Tel Nof intelligence unit, which is the headquarters of Mossad in Tel Aviv. Business Standard has detailed the Iranian operation succinctly in their excerpt on this story. Iran late on Tuesday fired ballistic missiles targeting 2 military bases of Israel and the headquarters of Mossad. Israel's intelligence service claimed Iranian state television, citing Mohammad Bagheri, Iran's top military officer. Chief of the General Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, Mohammad Bagheri, told Press TV that the Nevatim Air Base, the Netzarim military facility and the Tel Nof intelligence unit were hit in the Tuesday night attack, dubbed Operation True Promise 2. Keir Starmer owes this nation an apology, but of course that won't happen because this is a man who never takes responsibility, never holds any principles, and most of all, never ever says sorry. This is a guy who is a former human rights lawyer, lest we forget, who is literally making it up when he says Iran are deliberately targeting Israeli civilians, when Israel have killed over 40,000 civilians in Gaza over the last 12 months nearly, and he has no problem remaining one of Israel's staunchest allies despite that. The UN has decried Israel as an apartheid state for its conduct and its oppression of civilians in the occupied Palestinian territories, and Keir Starmer, the human rights lawyer, remains unperturbed in his ongoing support for Israel. The International Court of Justice is investigating Israel for the plausible crime of genocide, as Starmer doesn't budge in his allegiance to Israel. And I think allegiance is an apt term here because, frankly, he's not representing us here at all. Most Brits don't want to be associated with Israel anymore. 66% of the UK that have been polled now have an unfavourable opinion of Israel, despite Starmer's best efforts to convince us otherwise, as we continue to witness more violence perpetrated by them across social media. His words there in that public announcement coming as they did immediately after an Iranian retaliation, but also coming right after Israel targeted a Gazan orphanage. It's no wonder his popularity has fallen nearly 50 points since the general election, when this farce of a position over Israel is a not insignificant part of that, along with the total lack of change from the policies of the last Conservative government. If Starmer thinks being unpopular now is something he can fix later because he's got 5 years in power, support for Israel, lying for them like this, is going to show him otherwise, I fancy. It certainly ought to, because people will not forget this. I can't think of many more dislikable excuses for a human being right now than Keir Starmer. May his personal approval ratings nosedive even further. It isn't, of course, just our politicians being pathetically pro-Israel, of course. Our media is too, isn't it? But just as Starmer is massively miscalculated here, so did Sky News' Mark Austin when he tried the pro-Israel sales pitch on Iranian scholar Professor Mohammad Marandi and had his backside served up to him on a platter. Get the details of that epic exchange in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do stick with this channel a little bit longer, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers, folks.